Welcome to This Week in Hospitality Marketing, the podcast show number 261, with your host, Lauren Gray.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hospitality Marketing, the podcast. I am your host, Lauren Gray, and this is episode number 261. So each week we spend around 20 to 30 minutes sharing the most interesting tools, news, and techniques being used in marketing for the hospitality industry. We also do a quick recap of our weekly live video show, This Week in Hospitality Marketing, which also airs every Friday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern U.S. time. So with that, let's get started.
And now, today's new resource tool.
So our tool for review this week is kind of a fun one. I just got it, and I've been messing with it a little bit, but I really picked it up and expanded on getting it because of the potential of what I'm using it now for. And it will lend, of course, itself to our technique of the week, but the tool itself is called Phrase.io, Frase.io. Now, the premise of the platform is to create AI-generated content. Now, AI gets used and tossed around quite a lot. Sometimes it's just machine learning, or sometimes it's just algorithmic learning, conditional statements, or whatever. This one lends itself to be a little bit more advanced than that. I think it does a very good job of filtering out versus just giving you data. Now, let me explain a little bit of what this purposely does. It goes in and looks for the content based on question queries that you give it. So this goes to our technique of answering questions. If you ask questions of this, it'll go and look for who's providing the most relevant, optimized answer to those questions. You can be as granular about those questions as you like, or as broad as the questions as you would like. It queries out a tremendous amount of platforms, not just Google, but all of them in that sense. I just want blank as to some of the other platforms that they do. But it hits all the TripAdvisors, just everything that there's questions and content for. And it puts it all together into different categories. The category breakdowns are relatively nice. They're topics, they're questions, there's links. And the cool part of it is once you do this, it'll pull this in, it's what's called create a document. Once you create a document based on answering that particular question, and it breaks it down into lots of different sections, you can see what those things are and then say, oh, I liked what that says. And literally cut it and move it over into creating this document for yourself. Now, the misnomer is document, because it's not as if you're just creating something to read or something to put into a printout or anything like this. This document is actually creating page content for you. It's allowing you to pull in the isolated pieces of content most relevant to this question, the links even associated with it, and then it even helps you optimize all that content together, so it doesn't literally look like a cut and paste job of different pieces being put together for this. Then you can take that content, that document as it were, and use that specifically on your website addressing that particular question. And this is where the core of why I got all of this put together for was it is very arduous, very time consuming in two facets of researching what you think is content relevant to your website, whether it be for your hotel, restaurant, destination, what have you. Also too, it is very time sensitive to be anticipating what the questions are that people are asking and how well you rank in comparison to somebody else, and should you rank and should you develop content that addresses that question, or is it just a very small, granular, long tail funnel, multi-word search that really isn't going to generate much? There's a lot of time consumption with all that. That's where, if you notice with any of your third-party contracts, a large portion of time or money spent by you with them is associated with SEO, and that is the optimization of content to your website. And what content goes on your website, and what format, and how does it address certain things. It used to be relatively simple, like here's the 20 things to do in October in my destination. Yes, but then when traffic would flow through that page, you really weren't too certain what it was that it was being drawn to. Was it your third or your 12th or your 8th item on the list? Well, was it none of them at all? And it just happened to be a page that had a keyword that was associated with what the search was. Then on top of that, you look at your attribution models with Google Analytics. You see it in a sequence. Then you have to do this forensic investigative. Well, why is that there versus this? Is it connected to this page? Oh, okay, it's because of this ad for this event. That means that event must have been the organic. That must have been the social post. And it takes a lot of time to do all this, as much as it is for you listening to me talk about it, really. Phrase, I hope, and it has been so far, very, very helpful in culling down the discovery components of content. It also has a really cool second feature, which only began to get used by me, and I actually put it on my own website. And that is, it is a search content. It will create for you your own query bot, your answer engine. And now it's rather robust. It will only do 100 of these answers per month. For the account that I have, you can get bigger accounts, obviously, of it. But what it does do is it allows that when a guest goes to your website, it can ask a question. And from that, it can determine what it is they're looking for and research information and pull that together and create, in its mind, a document, in your case, a page for your website, that would then answer towards that question as optimized as possible. Which makes it very powerful, because then you're not second guessing what your guests are looking for and saying, well, I think they might be wondering about this festival or this event happening of what sort, or this type of time of year, what they might be interested in looking for, or these restaurants or that restaurant or this type of food. Rather than not knowing where it is or what it is that people are looking for, this kind of platform, and those that are like it, and there are some similarities to other platforms, will help identify what that content is, so that you can best suit what it is that you would like to put on to your website. So that is our tool for this week, and that is phrase.io, which brings us to our technique.
Now, for this week's hospitality technique.
So our technique, obviously tied to our tool, and that is, are you providing the answers to what your guests are looking for? A brilliant statement was made recently on the live show, and I think Stuart Butler did this. We're no longer into the world of optimization. Optimization, you can look it up by definition, what have you, and again, this lends to our news article that we're going to review here in a little bit. We always were assumptive that we would put all the things that we would think our guests were wanting to know and put them on our website and provide hopefully useful navigation to do so. But here was the rub. Oftentimes we put more than we needed. It was very cluttered. We ended up making a lot of hide and seek stuff where you had to go down in depth before you found what it is that you were looking for, if even at all. So then some of the earlier solutions were, well, you need to put a search engine on your own website. Google provided that, where it would just search your website for content that people were looking for. Problem was, if they didn't phrase it correctly or use the right words, they still didn't get the content that they were looking for, because it wasn't exactly the way that you had the content. And that made it very challenging as well, because you may have had good content about what people were searching for, but you used the wrong context in doing so. So there was a statement made that Bill Gates said that the world of search is based on verbs. And verbs aren't necessarily the actual word type, as it is, they're looking for something. And that's what we are now. You see what Google has done, where it can't rely upon our ability to put the right content on our websites that they discover by crawling, and hence put our website in front of the search query that people are using their platform for. They've said, you know what, we can't trust that. We're going to create our own ability to find what it is we're looking for and optimize what that would be in an answer box, which we call Google Zero, or I call Google Zero, which is that box you see where it's like, how far is it to the airport from? What's the closest Korean food restaurant from? Whatever those are, we've come to knowing that we need to put that content on our websites. We've had many podcasts and many shows talking about the changing context that our websites now have. It's not just about talking about ourselves. These are our amenities. Here's our lobby. Here's our room. It has a coffee pot in it. It has a TV in it. That is not the content that people search for. Nobody really looks for, does this hotel have TVs? Not unless they're worried that it might not. I'll give some personal examples. We're looking at the potential of traveling for a few days away, remotely, distantly, and we're looking about pet friendliness. And you would be surprised how buried that content is on so many websites, if even at all out there. And this is for destinations, it's for CVBs, it's for chambers, it's for all these people. They don't seem to realize that importance has elevated itself recently with people having acquired more pets and knowing that they want to travel with their pets and knowing that they can't really leave their pets with somebody else, given the fact that there's uncertainties as to transmissions and so forth. And so they are going to want to, if they can, get away for a few days, bring their pet. So it should heighten itself in content. It should be featured almost in some ways for it. So all that in mind, if you can create better content answering questions, you get two huge benefits. The biggest benefit is that guests discover what they're looking for when they find you. Biggest one. The guests enjoy it. It's easy. It's functional. It's discoverable. It answers their question. Let me know more now. I found a place that gave me an answer. Now let me ask another question, and on and on and on. The second is Google will love you, because now Google will take it and say, wow, you seem to have great relevance with these pieces of content. Let me put you in our answer box that says, this is about pets, and boom, here we are for that beach, or for that mountain retreat, or for that cabin, or whatever it is. You're the authority on that answer to that question, which again ties back to our tool that we're bringing up today, phrase.io. It can be very time consuming, very much guesswork, as I mentioned, trying to determine what these contexts are. And you can sit there and literally, I have done this. This is old school. What question would I ask if I'm traveling to my destination that I'm trying to optimize? What's this? What's this? What's that? Where far is this? Is this close by? What is there to do? Wonder if I was this age and not that age. Wonder if I had kids and didn't have kids. So many variables. Why not allow the technology to support what we're doing by having that filtered through, by using what questions are being asked, finding out the optimized answer to that, and assuming that role by adding that content to your website, providing the answers that your guests are looking for. So I ask you the question again for our technique of the week. Are you providing the answers to what your guests are looking for?
Now, this week's hospitality news that you should know.
Okay, so news and show review. We had a guest host with us, David Malini. Easier to type than it is to say. David is the CEO of Angie Hospitality. Just recently minted in that role, actually. He picked it up at the beginning of July. No time like the present, right? Angie Hospitality does voice activation software for hotels. I'll be honest with you, I was initially a skeptic of the conversation because I don't like adding that kind of hardware into rooms, one from a privatization point of view, the second from having been an old hotelier, just the maintenance of stuff. And anytime you try to get on the front edge of technology, it's really ugly when you end up being on the back end after a couple of years, because the investment to put it into the rooms is pretty heavy. I'm not saying of his platforms, but in general technology. And because of that, after a couple of years, that newness isn't there anymore. And some people, it can have been so new, they don't understand it. Case in point, I stayed at a hotel in Las Vegas. They had dedicated themselves several thousand rooms, actually, to put a screen beside the bed that controlled all your lights and TVs and everything in it. Really spiffy, super neat, except for it was the only place you really could control the stuff. So you always had to sit down on the bed to control it. Two, there was a wire loose in it, and after about 3 calls down, they finally had somebody that pulled the wire all the way from the wall into it and had replaced all of it before it finally worked correctly, because somebody had knocked it off the countertop or broke it or tugged on the wire or something, but it had hardware issues to that. In the meanwhile, I couldn't turn on half the lights in the room or what have you with it. And it was just, that's the flaws of those kind of things. Well, David and his voice activation software went through a very long discussion, great discussion with him actually. With us was also Adele Gutman from Aspire Reputation, Dean Schmidt from Basecamp MetaSearch. We also had Kat Mohammed, who is the Director of Education for AHOA, Asian American Hotel Owners Association. Mr. Tim Peter from Tim Peter and Associates, Tristan Hayward and Ben Henley, both from 3 and 6 Agency from across the pond in England. So those were our fellow co-hosts with us. We had a really nice discussion as to usabilities, functionalities, security, value proposition. Of course, now with our current circumstances, and this is something that David brought out prior to the COVID incident and pandemic, it was all about convenience. Now it's actually about safety, because by being able to communicate verbally within the room, adjusting the temperature, turning on the TV, calling down for room service, calling the front desk even. And also, he said, from the cost savings of even replacing two pieces of hardware in the room that have less value than they had before, and that is the clock and the phone. By having the voice command be your phone for you now, still be able to call 911 and all the important things that are required for it, it actually saved the hotel money from removing those pieces and items away. Because obviously you say, well, what about the clock? Well, the clock is what time is it? And it would actually answer. It would say, hey, Angie, what time is it? And it would give you the time. So in that sense, it helped. And also from a safety point of view, it was much fewer things to keep clean, cleanliness issues in the rooms, the cost of that going down. And also from a safety perspective, for guest usages, is one more thing that you can actually sell towards what a feature is of your hotel, that you have less contact issues in the room by touching thermostats or clocks or phones or whatever have you, or even room service or using your own hardware. So it was really good, fun conversation with that. It lasted for quite a while. We talked again about the implementation of potential savings like this and the direction where all this technology was going to go in this voice activation world. We have in our own group of hosts, we have our own skeptics as to how far this will go and how much security can really be put into it. And what else from that will be coming from all of it. We also talk about the real ramifications of from a news article of the government forcing the sale of TikTok. How is that possible that that is being put into play? Then it goes into several platforms at that point. Well, when does that stop? That's a slippery slope. If you're saying we feel that this company, unless it's owned by the U.S., we don't want it in the U.S. because we're afraid of the data that's being pulled. It's a legitimate concern. But by the same token, when did governments become the enforcers of who gets to own what companies for them to be in the? It's a slippery slope. So we had a good show. And always in recent weeks and months, actually, our shows have been running a little over 2 hours each week, which is not out of the norm. We usually hit the 2 hour mark, but for some reason, these past couple of months, because of all the things we've had to be able to talk about, we ran over a little bit more. So that brings me to my news feature of the week, which goes pretty much hand in hand again with the technique and the tools. Go figure. And it comes from a website called medium.com. And it says marketing, the complete guide to SEO in 2020. Now, you may think that's a little bit of a, old news, same news kind of thing. But really, it kind of lends itself to what we were talking about before of the evolving role of SEO, going from an optimization of what words and terms and content to more context and search. And this is where I also pulled the quote from Bill Gates about the world turning into verbs for when it comes to search. And why do they search? And what are they doing for? They're answering a question. They want a question to be answered, which they did. The article was very well written, I think, from Anna Klowitter. It was a neat way of looking at why do people search, and then going through kind of a step-by-step process, understanding the person looking at your site, which is the demographics, the geographies, the details of the purpose of why they landed on your site. Obviously knowing that we first have to make sure that they land on our site. Well, how do we do that? By making sure that our content and the context of that content is relevant to answering questions, not just about what we want to say about ourselves, but what it is that we need to say about ourselves that they're looking for. And sometimes it isn't talking about ourselves as it is talking about content that is related to us, whether it be event-driven, destination-driven, or what have you. And that's what brings them to our website, because we're the authority in answering that question. And then from there, they begin to go forward. There's also the usage of the words. That will never really go away, because as we know from Bert, it's the words before and after, and the context of what the search is for. The intent of the search is the critical component to that. So the words being used are just as important as the context that the words are being put into a sentence for. There's also the what are you referring to when it comes to your URLs. Sometimes you can get very fragmented as to naming protocols that have no relevance to the context of the page itself. It could be local events /October/2020. Might be somewhat relevant, but maybe something more of like XYZ Wine Festival might be a little bit more direct. So there is naming protocols that go into place, as well as what you were linking to at the time, and for that context as well. Always is the evaluation process to this. As you're looking at your content and how it's being engaged, literally looking at your analytics and seeing the funnel, the progression of where did they come through, where did they go, how much time did they spend, why did they go to the go, and more importantly, or as importantly, is why did they leave? When did they leave? At what point did they leave? How far did they get before they left? These are the questions that you want to get answered, because those are the things that you use to improve your relationship of the communication from your website to the person that's looking for an answer to their question. So there you have it, news and show review. Remember, you can find us on Google Play, Apple iTunes, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Spotify, Pandora, TuneIn. The list goes on, 38 different platforms and counting. We're even on Amazon's Alexa, Google Assistant, and Siri. Just ask to play the Hospitality Marketing Podcast. And no matter which one you may use, if you like the show, please rate us and leave a comment that allows others to find our content as well and hopefully enjoy it or find good value to it as much, hopefully, as you have as well. Also, if this is your first time hearing us, you can, of course, subscribe to our show on any of those platforms we just mentioned, or that however you discovered us. And of course, for an archive of all of our previous podcasts, you can go to hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com/podcasts. That's with an S. And don't forget our live video talk show that you can join and participate in every Friday at 11:30 Eastern U.S. time, called This Week in Hospitality Marketing, the live show. And for that, you can simply go to hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com/live. There you'll see not only registration for our upcoming show, but a link to all of our previous 261 shows that we've had so far in 32 countries with over 25,000 people a week joining us. So it's been a great over 6 years. As a matter of fact, our anniversary is coming up for our live show, I believe, next week, going into our 7th year. So again, thank you for the privilege of your time, and we look forward to talking to you next week.
You have been listening to This Week in Hospitality Marketing, the podcast show 261, brought to you by Hospitality Digital Marketing in support of the HSMAI, the Hospitality Sales and Marketing Association International. All rights reserved. Copyright 2020.